Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Ultraverse, the 25th anniversary celebration. I'm J.C. Vaughn from the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide. Much of my early days in comics are true. The Ultraverse is to blame, specifically Tom Mason. But I'm really excited to be here. This is one of my favorite comic book universes. And to start things off, I think we'll just go down the row and do the Sunday school thing. Who are you? How did you get involved with the Ultraverse? And what are you doing now? Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave Aldrich. I was the publisher of the Ultraverse and the publisher now of the whole time. And now I'm just Tom and Chris's best friend.
And he works at Macy's as Santa Claus in Christmas season.
Hi, I'm Chris Solom. I was the editor-in-chief of the Ultraverse, and I work with Dave and Tom and everybody else here for some of the best years of my life. Now I'm working with video games.
I'm Aaron Lopresti, the unheralded mastermind behind the Ultraverse, and I also drew Sledge for them. And I'm actually drawing for DC Comics and have been for about the last 8 years.
I'm Barb Kelberg. I'm one of those rare birds, a woman inker. And I worked on 9 of the titles for Ultraverse. I first started out doing, way back when it was still Adventure Comics, I did 11 issues of Planet of the Apes, and then a couple of years later when they started up the Malibu line, they gave me a call. So I was very happy about that.
And I'm either Terry Dodson or Rick Hogarth, but I don't know which at this point. Actually, I'm Rick Hogarth, and I do comics for Marvel and DC, and when I got an opportunity to join this group, I jumped at it. It was a lot of fun. It was one of the best experiences in my professional life.
My name is Ross Ritchie, and I worked in the marketing department at Malibu Comics on the Ultraverse titles, and I reported to this guy, Tom Mason, my boss.
I'm so sorry.
I'm Tom Mason. I just happened to be in the office when the Ultraverse was created, and so they let me play along.
I'm Robert McGinney. I started buying them off the rack in 1992, and I just bought my most recent one today.
We have various associate members of the Ultraverse in the audience, and Dave, you want to start pointing some folks out?
I just think everybody who worked on the Ultraverse who's in the audience, stand up.
And Dave has prepared a monumental slideshow, and I think we got to kick things off with that now.
There you go.
So, okay, this right, you hit it right from the first slide. How did the Ultraverse, the Malibu imprint, how did all of these things congeal into what we later knew as the Ultraverse?
That was Chris's fault. Well, tell him why you did what you did. It's not my fault.
He's still the boss.
So we actually, for the whole time we were building Malibu, we were kind of working month to month and building up, trying lots of different things. If anyone's familiar with Malibu Comics, we did how many comics? Hundreds? Just everything you can possibly imagine. And when we decided to do our own superhero universe, we were trying to think of how could we do something that's different from everybody else? What could we do? And so we thought about it, and we had 2 or 3 different ideas. And the one that we settled on was, let's do something that's really about storytelling, about a writer-driven universe that had a really interesting common background that we could bring all these characters together from. And that's what we did. So we ended up going out and getting some of the best writers in comics, people that we really loved ourselves, and new and up-and-coming talents.
So when you guys...
Terry Dodson.
Oh, there.
Nice of you to show up.
All right, so
Sure, but we'll be here in a minute.
right before this hit, you guys at Malibu published some pretty top-selling comics you can see on the list here. Dave, you want to talk about how that deal came about?
Yeah, we worked a lot with Rob Liefeld, and then when the Image thing was about to happen, Chris and Tom and I flew out to New York City and made the deal, and then as history will show, the entire industry blew up, and so in a good way, but like they've said over and over again, the Image guys wanted to control everything about whatever they did, and rightfully so. And so when it was time for them to go, we had to have something else to offer the industry, and we wanted to grow our business as well. So that's when that's how we got started working on the Ultraverse, was during the time when Image was with us.
You left out the most important part,
Of course I did, Tom. What was that part?
which you had known Liefeld since he was like a teenager.
Yeah, that's actually true. We actually saw the initial pitch for Youngblood in 1987. Wow. So 5 years before Image launched, he pitched it to us, and then it never became a thing until 1992.
Well, that's because he got the job at doing Hawk and Dove, right?
Yeah, right, yeah, and then everything sort of went from there, and then he moved on to X-Force.
New Mutants first, then X-Force.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so the good slide you've got there is some of the Malibu imprints. I guess that's all Eternity stuff up there.
Yeah, I think so, right?
And how many books at this stage? How many books a month were you guys producing?
For about 6 years, we were at 30 books a month.
Holy Toledo!
And that was the most of the first 6 years, we were about 30 books a month for about 5 years straight before the Ultraverse split.
Holy crap!
So we were busy, and we did a lot of stuff, including Dinosaurs for Hire.
Tom,
Yes.
every
Present.
week, once that first hit, whatever it was, previews or whatever back in the day, the number one, I would go into Lone Star where my friend was the manager, each week up my order for that before it ever came out, because it was dinosaurs working for the federal government and carrying guns. What is not to love?
This is why we're still friends.
And that had a lot to do with me checking out everything that you guys were doing. Ape Nation was the crossover with Planet of the Apes and Alien Nation. And how did that happen?
We had both licenses, and we said, wouldn't that be cool?
And then the
The
next one.
font of creativity.
The next one is the Protectors, which is the start of it's a superhero team.
Yep.
So was that in any way foundational for the Ultraverse?
I think editorially a little bit, but Chris could probably talk about the editorial.
Yeah, it was, but it didn't have an overarching theme in terms of what we were trying to do from a marketing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It was really just, it was a love letter to these older characters that we wanted to bring back.
Sure.
And so on the Ultraverse side, we actually moved some of the characters that we were going to do for Protectors. We ended up reworking them and bringing them into the Ultraverse down the road.
Got it. And a title that nobody's heard of, Men in Black.
What was that about?
Yeah.
So, okay, next up.
Sorry.
All right.
Not that Walking Dead.
More licensed stuff.
Except for Walking Dead, that was a different Walking Dead.
Which, so if we did it now, we could call it the original Walking Dead.
Still looks like zombies eating people.
Sort of, or like sort of like the real Ghostbusters. This could be like the real Walking Dead.
Yeah, we even published Sergio Ardonis before we published the Ultraverse.
All right.
But that's not what this is about.
I think this slide says it well. So enough with the pre-Ultraverse stuff. Let's get to the Ultraverse.
Look at the baby.
Aren't they cute?
Man, those guys are good looking.
All right. Ross, when you walked in the door there,
Yeah.
how many of these guys did you know?
I didn't know anybody. I had met Chris, I think, in my job interview, and Tom must have been in it. But yeah, no, it was pretty spectacular to meet so many of my heroes growing up, you know, being Mike Barr, Steve Englehart, Steve Gerber. Gerber was such a tremendous guy, so much fun, amazing. Barry Windsor Smith, over the course of the publishing, I had a lot of fun hanging out with him. It was amazing. It was an incredible time.
I remember Gerber was the first person to ever send me a compressed file because he wanted me to read one of the scripts when I was, when Tom started hooking me up with people to do interviews with.
Yeah,
And he was so gracious with his time about that.
yeah.
That's because it was his first script on time.
You know, it wasn't the current one, it was an older one. Right. So, okay, this is the start of your summit, right? The summit that started the Ultraverse.
Right. We all locked ourselves in a hotel basically.
Chris, what was involved in that?
A broken laptop is the way I remember it. So we decided to put all of our notes into this big backstory that we were building up, and I had one copy on a hard drive, and I brought my careful laptop over, I set it open, and I went, oh, wait a minute, and I pulled back, tripped on the cord, smashed the computer into a million bits, and from that point on, for the rest of the summit, I was on notebooks, it was on non-digital. But yeah, we were really advanced actually in Malibu, just in general, you know, in terms of having email before anybody else did.
Yeah, that's true.
Chris Olm, not a gymnast.
Yeah, not a gymnast.
And so, were there any people involved besides, I mean, I know about obviously Larry Niven, who didn't actually write the comics, but helped universe-wise. What was his sort of role in it?
Larry was really instrumental in helping us build the backstory, especially the Discworld idea. I was a big fan of Larry's Ringworld stories, and so we wanted to create a sort of a scientifically plausible environment that we could have all sorts of things happening that were essentially on another dimension from the things that were happening on Earth. We wanted it to be different from all the stuff that both Marvel and DC were doing, and Larry was really instrumental in creating very interesting backgrounds.
The thing that I have always wondered about that, and Tom, you can answer this too, in that meeting, you have a lot of really talented writers. Did they get along?
Yes.
Yes.
Why, yes, they did.
Why, yes, they did.
Of course they did.
It was very creative. What the thing is the well, I would say they all got along, but they all disagreed, and so there was a lot of wrangling of who had the better idea, who had the better character name, what name worked, what name didn't work, because I think everybody, Prime had the original name, Nightman had its original name, I think Englehart had trouble coming up with the Stranger's name, and people were throwing out different ideas for superheroes, and some of them were really, well, you know, when you're sitting in a room with 7 or 8 different people and you're trying to come up with superheroes and superpowers, a lot of them are really tedious and dull. And you have to
have no experience with
you sort of have to pick through what's good and what's not good, and try to balance out, here's teams, here's female heroes, here's male heroes, here's solo heroes, here's a duo, here's this, here's that. And so there's a lot of back and forth. It's like putting 6 cats in a bag sometimes. and
I usually max out around 5.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody, it was not the kind of thing where you held a grudge, where you would just, then you would go out and you would go out to dinner, and then you would, you know, joke around and laugh around, and it was just, whatever disagreements it was, stayed in the room.
Well, that's how we ended up with Adam Bob.
Yeah.
That, how did, Adam Bob's is a great one. I love that one. Okay, how did, what was the funniest rejected idea? Oh.
Drunken Magician.
Yep. That's what I was going to say.
I think it's Gerber Englehart, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah. Drunken Magician.
It's Drunken Magician, which is the drunker he got, the more powerful he got. But he was so drunk he couldn't control all of his power. And I think that never made it out of the
I
rules.
don't understand why.
But it's in the original Bible.
That's cool.
That's epic.
That's great.
Drunken Magician.
All right.
Like the plot for
So-
Strange too.
One of the big things about the Ultraverse was that you guys took some risks in advertising that regular mere comic book folks weren't. what was behind the thinking in that, and what were your successes and failures? Tom, you want to start off?
We had $1 million to start with, and so you can do a lot that is not traditional when you have $1 million. And I think the successes were the TV commercials because they existed, and then the posters that we put on bus benches and on the sides of buses in some of the big cities. And we were able to target, because it's so focused, we were able to target the bus stops right outside of the DC offices and the Marvel offices. So every time they went outside their office, they would see a giant 4 by 10 foot ad for the
All right,
Ultraverse.
I gotta ask, what kind of reactions did you guys get?
It went over really well.
We were very, very popular after that.
Yeah.
Did you hear from creators that had been to those companies? And
I still hear about it.
Yes.
I talked with Scott Kobos about it 2 weeks ago. He goes, I love coming out of Marvel and seeing that big Ultraverse sign right outside their office door.
that's fantastic.
We also did TV.
Yep.
Oh, the TV commercials were groundbreaking. It wouldn't blow people away now. They'd still take note, but it was really groundbreaking back at the time. Ross, something?
Yeah, well, I think Newsarama just did a write-up about them, and Chris is featured as a comic store clerk. They are all on YouTube. You can go check them out if you
It was the
haven't
role of my life.
seen. All sold out.
I do that line about 100 times.
That's right.
Okay.
But in order to launch properly, we knew that we had to get everybody on our side up front. Before anything ever got released, we had to talk to the retailers, we had to talk to the distributors, we had to talk to the fans, we had to talk to everybody. So you can see in this slide, Chris is standing at the dais of our Ultra Conference in 1993, and we flew in influential retailers, distributors, a ton of press people, and we just wined them and dined them and took them to Universal Studios and showed them how great the Ultraverse was. We had all the creators there, and it was something like I don't think's been ever done since. And there's some pictures from that, including me and Mr. Assistant Editor, or I guess Editor Dan Danko having a smoke.
That's Aaron Lepresti at the top.
Yeah, Aaron with hair.
Yes, Gerber and I were discussing whose glasses were bigger. Couldn't really come to an agreement, which was the first of many times we didn't come to an agreement.
Here's the bus poster. What's the big poster there?
That's the Dave Dorman thing, isn't it?
That's the Dave Dorman painting. We use that everywhere. Put that in the shelters on the bus bench. Not on the bus benches themselves, but on those
Shelters, right.
They have those big areas that they use, and then those are the two things that were actually on the buses themselves.
Where were they on buses?
Oh, Jesus.
There he is, all sold out.
No. I mean, what towns?
Major markets: New York, LA, Philly. Yes.
All right, so this is the TV. This is the TV ads.
Oh, there's a
I remember that voice. Jump on now.
We had a guy bungee jumping off of a tower for the Jump On Now card.
How did we come up with that slogan? Do you remember, Joel?
I remember we spent all day on it. That's all I remember.
We had a whole bunch of them.
Oh my! It took us all day to come up with those dumb 3 words. It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Forward season sometime.
All right, now up to the point where we all start seeing the comics. Chris, you want to walk us through this? Say like what was going on behind the scenes, or what's a critical point with any of these?
So we wanted to have, one team book and 2 solo characters, and everyone really liked the idea of Prime almost right from the beginning. It's like one of our real solid character ideas, and we wanted to have a really strong launch. And I think, as you can see by the numbers, we did a pretty good job.
It was really, as a fan, it was a spectacular thing because you felt like the layers were being peeled back on this new world every time you went. Rick, when you got the script for The Strangers, had the characters already all been designed?
Yeah. By that time, who was the guy who did the main designs? Darren,
Was it Derek Robertson?
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of different guys.
and then
Robertson.
they gave me an opportunity to go over and pick a few out that I just didn't like at all, like Adam Bomb, I think was just a design I couldn't live with. But most of them were very good, you know, so I think I redid 2 of them and altered another 2, and the others I lived with because they were good and they worked real well for me. Because you gotta, when you're starting up something like that, you've gotta make it comfortable for yourself, if nothing else. There's no use trying to jam stuff in where it's not gonna work.
Yeah,
But I think, I really felt good at issue 1, not so much, but by issue 3, I was getting really comfortable with it. And those team books are not easy. As any artist will tell you, it gets tough real fast when you got all those characters.
Robert, when you were seeing these things coming out, what grabbed you about them? I know I can answer that for me, but what grabbed you about it?
I mean, the first thing was the art, especially Prime. That was the thing that just, all right, this is something different. And then the comics had they had like a West Coast feel. Everything else was, I'm from Florida, and everything else felt like it was New York City or somewhere up there, you know. But these felt different and interesting and just bright.
Both in setting and the coloring approach and all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that too. One of the things up here on this slide, and I don't know who should talk about this, but the hologram covers, how did that come up as a gimmick?
Well, we really like the hologram that came before that Marvel did with the Spider-Man cover. We were like, that's really unique, that's a really cool thing. There's not a lot of those around. How can we improve upon it? So we called up our printer and said, can we make it bigger? What can we do to make this more interesting? He goes, well, we could just print the whole cover as a hologram. We were like, well, that's a great idea, let's do that. So that's how it came about. And then Tom and Chris were both involved in trying to figure out how to make that happen, because you couldn't just hologram the drawing. You actually had to make molds, right? You had to make like molds with relief in them. And
Well, you have to do the artwork in layers, and so there are each part of the hologram is a specific layer. So there's a background layer, and there's the foreground layer, and there's 2 or 3 middle ground layers.
right, but some of the more exotic ones had sculpts, right? That were actually 3D sculpts that they put in there.
Yes.
Like especially the Prime one, yeah.
I forget which ones were sculpted.
Yeah, some of them were really sculpted.
I know the Strangers was because I got one of the sculpts.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
of course, it immediately fell apart on me once I got it.
Not so cool.
And we had a relationship with our printer, and they knew that we were always trying to do some interesting stuff. And so I think it was Dave who would always call the printer and say, what kind of machine do you have? What kind of thing do you have that we can't think of on our own? And they would always say, well, we got a machine that can punch a hole through a 32-page comic. Or we have a machine that can do this, or we have a machine that can do that. And then we would take it back to a meeting, and we would say, hey, our printer can do X, Y, and Z. How can we make that into a thing?
How were they received?
Well, everybody, well, because we held them back. So we gave them out sparingly.
We made them
So they were
very, very
considered-
exclusive, yeah.
They were considered not so much an exclusive thing, but sort of like a unicorn.
They were like a reward too, right?
We give them a lot out as thank yous to retailers. Whether the retailers sold them or not, we're up to them. But basically the retailers owned them.
Yeah, Tom would send me at a convention in early as an exhibitor, and I would go around and hand a few out to the retailers that were at the show, and then they would take that and mark it up to like $80 and put it as a wall book.
Ross, would that be like retailers who you knew were really supporting the line, or guys that were you trying to recruit with them?
All of the above. You know, we were using it as I think because they were so rare and so difficult to get, it was sort of like a way to juice, you know, sort of perception of collectability as well as a retail reward for, you know, inducing them to join with us or rewarding the fact that they were supporting us already.
So that made you the hologram fairy.
Yes, I was the hologram fairy.
The job description hologram fairy.
That's a good question. I used to hear the word ash can a lot. What did that refer to? What was an ash can?
Well, we converted what ASCANs were originally were publishers were trying to lock down trademarks and copyrights on titles and characters. And so they would quickly run some pages and put something through a copier and create what they called an ASCAN, and they distributed it to just a few people, and that would cover distributions.
That meant that they published it first so that they could claim the title.
And submit to the patent office and trademark and copyright.
And then we
stuff like that.
And then we completely perverted that whole situation into a way to make collectibles.
The way only comics can.
But functionally, it was a preview of an issue that
Right.
was going to ship, and so it was a way to be able to show retailers and fans what the interiors look like before the book shipped.
There's actually, in terms of marketing, there's actually a real logical use, and now that we did it in a logical fashion. You could go back to DC though, and you would see like Double Action Comics. They did that after Action Comics, and there's a whole set of DC ash cans that are really pricey and incredibly rare. These were probably the leading edge of this. A lot of publishers started doing it, where it would be teaser material for upcoming things.
I have something very important to say.
I believe you do.
I doubt that.
Mr. Rosenberg has entered the room, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Scott, for coming. It was very nice.
But before we move off the ash cans, but like there used to be conferences before Diamond did all the distribution. There were 18 distributors, and so these distributors like Capital or Diamond would have conferences, and so the ash cans was something you would give to the retailers at the conference to show them like what Strangers #1 looked like before they put their orders in.
Right.
Because the net existed, but nobody had it, so you could use the net to show it to people.
All right.
I want to start with my favorite Prime story. All right, everybody that's a fan of Prime pretty much admits that Norm Brayfogel's artwork was one of the defining elements of Prime. Norm was not our first choice to draw Prime. For those of you old comic book fans, I flew to England to try to get Alan Davis to draw Prime.
Did you hear that reaction? Is that not what happened when you told me?
Yeah. You just imagine, right? Alan Davis drawing Prime. So I went to a convention, I talked to Alan, he couldn't have been nicer. He looked me right in the eye and said, yeah, I'm retiring from comics. This is 92. I'm retiring from comics. I'm only going to work for the Boy Scouts from now on. I think his retirement lasted 4 months. But we're all very grateful that Norm took the job because he ended up defining the look and feel of our launch book. And he was great to work with.
All right. Next. Hard case.
What was the date on that Prime? Okay, June 15th. They both launched on June 15th. So,
How many books do we have, Tom? How many books at the same time do we have in progress? There's something like 8 or 9 at any given time.
Yeah, there were 9, because we had the schedule maxed out for almost more than half a year.
Yeah.
Before we submitted it.
well, the other thing too is we had to move the production schedule
Well,
up.
that's what I wanted. That's the question
We
I
had to
wanted
move
to
the
ask.
production schedule up 4 months or 6 months or something like that.
Because
Comics Greatest World got announced.
Dark Horse had announced Comics Greatest World. You guys were in process. What was involved in moving it up? What was it, 4 months or 6 months?
It was making Terry draw faster, making Barbie faster, making Eric draw faster, making